Even though this is an unpopular fantasy opinions video, don't be alarmed of the lack of Brandon Sanderson books that are on my shelf right now. Don't be afraid.
No. Be afraid. Be very afraid.
Hi, my name is Jake, and I am a bookish drummer. So this video should be a lot of fun. I'm going to be talking about all of my unpopular fantasy opinions, and I have a lot of them. I will say though, as a caveat, even though these are unpopular opinions for sure, I don't necessarily hate all of the books that I'm going to talk about here. In fact, most of them I just find to be mediocre. Like they were like 2-3 star books, whereas a lot of people think they're all-time great books. That's what most of this list is going to be about. There will be a couple books on the flip side, though, where I think they're great, whereas a lot of people don't think they're great. I think what I'll do is I'll start out with kind of the softball unpopular fantasy opinions, where they are unpopular for sure, but they're commonly unpopular, if that makes any sense. These books have tons of fans, but they also have tons of non-fans who really don't care for the book or the series, and I feel the same way. So I'll start out with that, and then I'll go into some more unpopular opinions where people are going to start judging me. Not that people aren't already doing that. And then for the end, I'll save some books that I personally really love, but that other people don't necessarily love as much as I do. Anyway, enough of the preamble. Let's jump right into it. So I'm going to start off with some commonly unpopular opinions. The first one will be Lord of the Rings. Now, I don't hate this series. I read the books a while back ago. They were fine. They weren't, spectacular for me. They weren't all-time favorites for me. They were fine. They weren't the best. Did I like them? Yes. Did I enjoy them? Yes. Did I think they're overrated? Yes, but at the same time, that's kind of like saying the Beatles are overrated. I will say it has been a long time since I've read the books, so maybe if I read them again, maybe I'll like them more. Who knows? But for now, I feel that they're, just a little bit overrated, and it's not really the kind of fantasy that I'm into. Along those same lines, we have Wheel of Time. I read Eye of the World a few years ago, and it was fine. Gave it 3 stars. And I tried reading the second book, where a lot of people told me that it picks up around the second or third book. I really couldn't get into it, and I DNF'd it. It's just not the series for me. I just felt the pacing was really bad. Like, it was really slow for large chunks of the book, and then when something interesting would happen, it would kind of go by really quickly. And I'm like, whoa, I want to spend a little bit more time with that. And none of the characters really grabbed me. The stuff that happened in the books wasn't that interesting. The world building was fine, but there was too much world building. Just overall, there's nothing wrong with it per se, but it's just not for me, and I will probably never continue with the series. The next series I have to talk about, I know a lot of people, it's kind of hit or miss for some people, and that would be Malazan, Book of the Fallen. Now, I've actually read the first 3 books in the Book of the Fallen series. The first book, weirdly enough, I liked the most out of the 3, and that's very unpopular. A lot of people say that, they read the first book and it was fine, but then they get to the second and the third book, and that's where they really start getting into it. For me, I kind of like the first book most, and then all of a sudden in the second book, you get a whole new cast of characters, and I'm like, there's more shit that I gotta remember now. I kind of have a love-hate relationship with Malazan. There's a lot of things that I do really enjoy about the book. There's a lot of memorable scenes that even though I haven't read these books in a very long time, there's some scenes that I still think about to this day. But then there's some aspects of the book where like Erickson is just purposely not divulging information. He has characters talk about something or someone, and he doesn't really give you any context as to what that someone or something is. You're just gonna eventually learn about it, and you're like, what the hell is this? So it's a series that I'm kind of putting on hold for now, but maybe I'll jump into it down the road. But for now, I'm not too interested in it at the moment. Apparently, for this next book, I'm the only person ever to have this opinion of this book. Not really, but it feels that way. And that would be Arm of the Sphinx, the second Sinlin book. I enjoyed it. I don't get me wrong, I did like it. I only gave it 3 stars though. Most people who continue on with the series love this book. They love the book even more than the first book, Senlin Ascends, because you get a bunch of different character perspectives. Whereas in the first book, you basically only get it through Sinlin's eyes, to where I kind of have the opposite view. I loved the first book and I loved Sinlin. So to see a lot of chapters not told from his perspective, I wasn't a huge fan, but it was fine. It was good. And definitely the last chapter of the book has me enticed to continue with the series. But yeah, I definitely have an unpopular opinion. I would assume most people who continue with the series give this book at least 4 or 5 stars. I only gave it 3. Along those same lines, another fantasy book that I enjoyed when I did read it, but a lot of people say it's their favorite fantasy book of all time, would be Name of the Wind. I read this book years ago, and when I first started reading it, I had heard so many people say that it was the best thing they've ever read, so I was very hyped for it. And I will admit that the first like 250 pages of the book were excellent. I loved it. But after, Quoth ends up at the university and we get the bulk of the story of him there, it was just kind of bland for me and boring. A lot of people have the opposite view where they get to through the 200 pages and they're like, that's pretty good. But once he gets to the university, that's where it starts to pick up. And I'm like, no. But I did enjoy the book overall. It wasn't bad. I gave it 3 stars, but so many people love Name of the Wind. They love the sequel. They give both books 5 stars. I couldn't get into the second book. I DNF'd it very quickly. But Name of the Wind was good. 3-star book, but definitely an unpopular opinion. And for this next unpopular opinion, I'm going to tread lightly because this opinion could change over time. Unlike a lot of these opinions, this opinion could change over time. And that would be, I feel that Joe Abercrombie overall is overrated. Don't kill me. Now, don't get me wrong. I've only read one book and I DNF'd the second book. I've read The Blade itself and it was good. I gave it 4 stars. For what it was good. But I went into the second book hoping that something would start happening, but I got like a couple hundred pages in and it was just kind of more of the same, and I quickly became bored with it. And I know a lot of people say that Joe Abercrombie is like the king of grimdark and he's like the best character writer ever. I wholeheartedly disagree with both of those. As far as him being the Lord of Grimdark or whatever, sure, whatever. But as far as character work, I mean, Glocta's really good. That's obvious. And I mean, that's about it, really. Like, I know people love Nine Fingers, and they love Giselle, and they love everyone else. I mean, Galacta was great, everyone else was fine. And I know people are probably going to badger me about that, but that's how I feel. And I know that some of his later books, some of his standalones, and then his kind of continuation with the First Law world are supposed to be even better than their original trilogy. And I am kind of interested to try his standalones because I hear that those books actually have plot. So maybe I would enjoy them more. I'm a bit hesitant though because from what I've read of, the blade itself was fine, but before they are hanged, it just wasn't for me. And I think I will eventually try to finish the book and maybe finish the trilogy. I actually have all of the audiobooks now, so I might as well sometime in the future, but definitely not a priority for me. And as far as like a popular fantasy author that I would choose to be the most overrated, sadly enough, it would be Joe Abercrombie. And if anyone is still here after the Abercrombie rant, you might leave after this one. Hopefully not, but hear me out. So these next two opinions kind of coincide with each other. You'll see why in just a second. The first one is that the original Mistborn trilogy, I feel, is overrated. That's one of them. Calm down. And the second one is that Era 2 is better than Era 1. That's the second one. Is anyone still with me? So, of course, when I say that the original Mistborn trilogy is overrated, I'm of course not saying that it's bad in any way. I very much enjoy the first book, The Final Empire. I think it's a 4.5-star book. I love Vin and Kelsier. They're great. And just the plot in general is really good. And it's just a great book. However, I feel like this book could have easily been a standalone. And I often think it should be. Which I know really doesn't make too much sense because you get so much more information and stuff happening in the second and the third book. But I'll be honest, I'm not a huge fan of either one. I did, slightly enjoy Well of Ascension. It's like a 3-star book, and there's some stuff, that happens that's fine. But really, my most unpopular Sanderson opinion is that I really just don't like Hero of Ages. I read it, the first time I read it, there's too much going on. And compared to the first book, like this book is only slightly longer than The Final Empire, but The Final Empire has like 40 chapters, and then this book has 80 chapters. So I feel it's written vastly different from the first book, and just the overall writing and how it changes throughout the trilogy, I just wasn't a fan. And I think a year or two ago, I was like, okay, maybe I should give the Mistborn trilogy a second shot. And, I reread this book and I liked it just fine. I reread Well of Ascension and I actually liked it a little less. And then I tried rereading Hero of Ages and I couldn't finish it because I was just like so bored and just, this is easily my least favorite Cosmere book. And I know it's some people's favorites, but it'll never be my favorite. And then as far as Era 2 goes, I do much prefer Era 2. I will say that I know it's not objectively better than the Mistborn trilogy, or the original Mistborn trilogy. But for me, it's just way more fun, way more easy to read, and I even like the characters more, which I know is probably an absurd thing to say. I mean, probably none of these characters are better than Vin. Vin is a terrific character, don't get me wrong. But overall, just Era 2, I love way more, and I can't wait till next year when we get the conclusion, Wax and Wayne Book 4, which I think it's called The Lost Metal. That will be awesome. So now we're going to get into some books that I actually really like, that most people, they're not a huge fan of these books, or they have a slightly different opinion than I do. Let's jump into it. So the first one that I'll quickly mention here is Harry Potter related. I'm not a huge Harry Potter fan, but overall, my favorite Harry Potter book is easily everyone's least favorite by far. Every single damn time I watched a Harry Potter ranking video, without fault, without question, everyone's least favorite Harry Potter book is Chamber of Secrets. It was always my favorite growing up, and even when I reread it as an adult, I still loved it as much. I don't understand. Like, come on, people. This next unpopular opinion comes from the Dark Tower series, one of my all-time favorite fantasy series. And it's a cool series because a lot of people have very different rankings for their favorite book. Some people really love Drawing of the Three, the second book. Some people really love The Wastelands, the third book. Some people especially love Wizard and Glass, which is kind of the flashback book. Other people might like the last book, the conclusion, the best. But a lot of people, their least favorite book, without question, is Song of Susanna. And I'm here to say that it's easily one of my favorite Dark Tower books. And I really enjoy it. I probably give it about 4.5 stars, whereas many people just flat out don't like it. They think it's filler. There's a kind of a weird aspect to it that people hate, that I love. And I definitely have an unpopular opinion. Fight me. And the last unpopular opinion I have, I would say it's fairly unpopular, although I don't think it's going to cause riots or anything. It's another Sanderson one, so we'll see what happens. It has to do with his standalones and his Cosmere. So we have Warbreaker and Elantris. Most people, I would say, prefer Warbreaker over Elantris, but I actually really enjoy Elantris, and I gave it 5 stars, whereas Warbreaker, I gave it 4 stars. Usually it's the reverse, where people really love Warbreaker, and they don't necessarily hate Elantris, but they recognize its faults, and they give it a lesser rating for it. But I really enjoyed it. I also think it has to do with kind of the reading order. Most people, for the most part, that's a dumb thing to say. Most people, when they start reading Sanderson, they start with Mistborn, and then they probably go to the standalones, and then they jump into Stormlight. I kind of did it the opposite. I read the first 2 Stormlight books, and then I read Elantris. Now, if I would have done it in a different order, maybe I would have liked things more versus the other, but I'm not sure where I'm going with this. In conclusion, I like Elantris a lot, and Warbreaker, while I do love it, I think Elantris is slightly better. Now, the caveat is I haven't really read these books in a long time, so maybe it would change if I reread them again. I don't really plan on doing it anytime soon. Maybe next year. Alright, so those are all of, if not most of, my unpopular fantasy opinions. Please let me know what you think of these in the comments below. Do you agree with any of these opinions? Do you wholeheartedly disagree with any of these opinions? And what are your unpopular fantasy opinions? I would love to chat about it in the comments, so please put it down in the comments. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. Thank you so much for watching, and have a terrific day.